Welcome, dear listeners. Tonight, let your thoughts drift gently as we take you on a peaceful journey. This is a space for calm, for quiet moments, and for the kind of stories that settle your heart and slow your breath. Make yourself comfortable, close your eyes if you wish, and allow the world to soften around you. Now, let's begin with tonight's story. Today's story is titled, The Fall of the Crimson Blade. In the flickering twilight of the imperial courtyard, Lord Kazuki Nakamura sat upon his lacquered dais like a fallen star slowly dimming against a backdrop of crimson banners. His armor, once gleaming beneath the rising sun and etched with the proud symbol of the Nakamura clan, now lay tarnished by rumors of treachery. Whispers had crept through the corridors of the palace like smoke, that Kazuki had plotted to overthrow Lord Takahiro, the scheming regent with cold eyes and a tongue sharper than any katana. Though Kazuki knew his loyalty to the emperor had never wavered, the webs of deceit spun by Takahiro's spies ensnared him nonetheless. That morning, Lady Emiko, pregnant with their first child, had waited in their private gardens for Kazuki's return. The cherry blossoms drifted around her like pale pink snow, swaying in the breeze. She tightened her grip on the silk of her sleeve, her heart pounding with a premonition she could not name. In the distance, the echo of military drums and a chorus of armored footsteps told her that something had gone terribly wrong. Before she could rise to meet him, shadowy figures appeared at the garden gate, armored retainers of the regent, faces obscured by grim helmets. They bore official seals of the court, yet their eyes gleamed with malice. Emiko's scream was silenced by the command of their captain. By order of Regent Takahiro, Lord Kazuki Nakamura stands accused of sedition against His Majesty. He is to be arrested and executed without delay. She stumbled toward them, desperate to embrace her husband, but a blade-thin barrier formed. The samurai code of conduct restrained Kazuki. His eyes, a storm of sorrow and regret, met hers for the briefest moment. At its center burned a pledge: protect Emiko at all costs, no matter the price of his own life. Moments later, in the private courtyard beyond the Moon Gate, Kazuki was bound in cords of silken rope stained crimson by the count of bravery wounds he'd refused to dress. He bore the humiliating charge with unyielding dignity, muttering apologies to Emiko that she could neither hear nor answer. As the executioner's block was laid before him, she crouched behind a blossoming plum tree, her vision blurred by tears. The gods of honor offered Kazuki a final mercy, the ritual of seppuku. With trembling hands, he took the short blade at his side. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath, the boughs above creaking softly as if giants wept. In that moment, Emiko pressed her fingers against the wood of the garden gate, her pulse echoing like war drums in her ears. She dared not watch the ritual to its bloody end, yet she could not tear herself away. A single, sharp stroke later, the crimson blade fell silent. Kazuki's final gaze, fierce and tender, lingered on Emiko's silhouette until the light of day faded from his eyes. The regent's retainers dragged his body away, heedless of the code of compassion that banished such desecration. And so vanished the last hope of the Nakamura clan's honor. Night fell like a sable curtain, smothering the gardens in shadow. Emiko slipped silently from her hiding place and pressed her palm against the jagged bark of an ancient pine. Beneath the moon's ghostly glow, she felt the life of her unborn child flutter with urgent insistence. A single decision crystallized within her wounded heart: she would flee from the palace, forsake her status and lands, and seek refuge in the remote Ashigara mountains. There, she would protect the child growing inside her, even as the world she once knew crumbled to ash. Before dawn, she wrapped herself in a travel cloak and stowed a small bundle of provisions: rice cakes, medicinal herbs, and a scrap of parchment bearing Kazuki's personal seal. She kissed the blade of his katana, cradled it against her chest, and whispered, "Our son will live, Kazuki. I swear it beneath the eyes of the sky." Then, with trembling legs but unwavering resolve, she melted into the labyrinth of palace lanes, the scent of cherry blossoms fading behind her like a memory. Over the course of several days, she journeyed northward along hidden mountain paths. Each footstep echoed the rebel heartbeats of distant samurai who still believed in justice. The world outside the capital was a tapestry of emerald pines, mist-wreathed valleys, and rushing streams that sang lullabies of freedom. Though her body ached with exhaustion and her mind quivered with grief, Emiko pressed on, drawing courage from the life swelling within her womb. One moonless night, as the howls of wolves rose in the darkness, she finally reached a secluded spring beneath a cluster of bamboo groves. There, beneath the patter of a sudden summer rain, her labor came swiftly. Emiko knelt upon damp earth, the bamboo leaves shimmering like silver blades overhead. Between the rush of pain and the roar of thunder, she bore a son, slender of finger, bright of eye, with a tuft of ebony hair that gleamed in the lantern's glow. She named him Haruto, Light of the Sun, hoping his life would pierce the darkness that had swallowed his father. As mother and child nestled together beneath a bamboo canopy, Emiko vowed to raise Haruto far from the intrigues of court life. She pressed the crimson-sealed parchment into his tiny hand and whispered, "One day, when the world is ready, you will carve your own path. But for now, rest, my son. Let the mountains teach you strength, let the forest teach you wisdom, and let this rain sing you to sleep." High above, the storm clouds parted, allowing a single beam of moonlight to touch the bamboo grove. In that silent moment, the earth seemed to hold its breath and sigh. A new story had begun, born of sorrow, forged in exile, and destined for legends yet unwritten. And so, beneath the whispering pines and the watchful gaze of the moon, the epic of Haruto, the child of exile, began to unfold. The sun had risen over the Ashigara mountains by the time Emiko awoke, her broken sleep filled with dreams of her husband's last gaze and the steady rhythm of Haruto's breathing. Beneath the striped canopy of emerald bamboo and the gentle patter of rain-dampened leaves, she had fashioned a simple shelter from woven mats and cedar branches. Nearby, a small hearth smoldered, sending wisps of fragrant smoke into the crisp morning air. Though the world beyond the grove brimmed with danger and memories of courtly betrayal, here Emiko found a fragile sanctuary where she could guide her son through the earliest lessons of survival and honor. By the time Haruto opened his dark, inquisitive eyes, the dew on the ground had already begun to evaporate under the growing warmth of dawn. His gaze was bright and clear, as though he recognized the wind's voice and the rustle of bamboo as old companions. Emiko smiled softly and lifted him into her arms. "Good morning, my light of the sun," she murmured, tucking a stray lock of ebony hair behind his ear. Haruto gurgled in delight, his tiny fingers reaching for the braided cord that held the crimson-sealed parchment from his father's blade. Though he could not yet read its elegant kanji, he sensed its weight as a talisman of destiny. Over the next weeks, Emiko taught Haruto the rhythms of mountain life. Each sunrise began with the gathering of medicinal herbs, ginkgo leaves and wild mugwort from the mossy ledges nearby. Emiko would cradle Haruto in a bind of woven bamboo fibers as she bent to pluck the slender green stalks, explaining in soothing tones which plants healed fever and which soothed aching limbs. Haruto's small hands found their way from one frond to the next, as if testing their textures and memorizing their shapes. When the final light of day faded, they returned to their grotto to brew simple teas over the hearth. The smoke curled through the bamboo shafts, mingling with the scent of wet earth and pine resin. It was on one such evening, as the sky deepened to indigo and fireflies blinked among the undergrowth, that Haruto first uttered his mother's name. Emiko had been recounting stories of his father's valor, describing in gentle words how Kazuki upheld his honor even when the world turned against him. Haruto listened, eyes wide, as memories Emiko did not know a newborn could possess seemed to flicker behind his pupils. Then, quietly but distinctly, he repeated, M-I-K-O. The syllables tumbled from his lips like stones down a quiet stream, and Emiko's heart both leapt and broke at once. In the days that followed, Emiko encouraged his early words, naming each creature that visited the grove, the chirping sparrow that alighted on the bamboo pole, the bright-eyed rabbit that nibbled clover at dawn, the graceful deer that passed through on silent hooves. At each introduction, Haruto echoed the names with increasing clarity. Tori, he said for sparrow. Yosagi, for rabbit. Shika, for deer. And with each echo, the bond between mother and child deepened, as though they spoke a language older than words themselves. But it was not only speech that seemed to bloom within Haruto. One afternoon, while Emiko rested beside the spring, weaving a simple amulet from cedar bark, Haruto crawled from her side and toddled toward the water's edge. The sunlight danced across the surface, creating ripples of gold and jade. Haruto reached out a tentative hand, and the water in the pool seemed to respond, swirling gently as though alive. To Emiko's astonishment, the pebbles beneath the water shifted in graceful patterns, as if guided by some unseen conductor. She rushed forward, heart pounding, calling his name. Haruto paused, his round eyes fixed on the shifting stones, and then he laughed a clear, melodious sound that echoed off the mountain walls. The stones stilled at his smiling face and settled back into place. Emiko knelt beside him, tears threatening to spill. "My son," she whispered, pressing her palm to the cool water. "You carry more than my love and your father's legacy, you carry the spirit of these mountains." Haruto reached up to touch her cheek, his tiny fingers tracing the line of her jaw. In that moment, Emiko sensed the truth. Haruto had inherited not only Kazuki's courage, but a deeper connection to the natural world, an ancient kinship between human and earth that could heal as much as harm. Word of the bamboo child's miraculous affinity spread swiftly through the mountain villages. Merchants and woodcutters, travelers, and hermits all spoke in hushed tones of the boy who could move stones with a glance and commune with the forest creatures. Some came seeking blessings, leaving small offerings of sweet rice cakes or carved wooden figurines at the edge of the grove. Haruto would accept these gifts with shy curiosity, often slipping the rice into his mouth before the giver could finish their bow. And the animals, once timid, now ventured nearer in his presence. A pair of fox kits would curl in his lap, and an elderly bear, scarred by years of solo wanderings, would bring him handfuls of wild berries. Yet as Haruto's legend grew, so too did the circle of shadows watching from beyond the hills. High-ranking samurai, loyal to Regent Takahiro's court, heard rumors of a child born of noble blood and clothed in mountain magic. In the capital, Regent Takahiro himself frowned as reports reached his ears. If Haruto's power was allowed to thrive, it could attract the allegiance of disaffected clans and upset the fragile balance of power that kept Takahiro's rule unchallenged. And so, he dispatched his most trusted enforcer, Captain Raiden Hattori, a man whose sword arm was as merciless as his ambition. Captain Hattori began his descent into the Ashigura foothills under cover of twilight, his black-clad retinue moving like a tide of shadows. Their orders were precise: capture the child with minimal bloodshed to avoid stirring rumors of atrocity. Yet as the column approached the grove, the forest itself seemed to rouse in defense. Bamboo stalks creaked and swayed without wind, deer stamped their hooves in warning, and the air hummed with an unseen energy. Captain Hattori's men halted at the grove's edge, uneasy under the tree's restless watch. He raised a hand in command, but his voice faltered as a gentle breeze carried the faint sound of Haruto's laughter. Inside the shelter, Emiko sensed the tension before she saw the armed men. Her heart constricted, a primal fear that threatened to uproot her resolve. She soothed Haruto with the lullaby Kazuki had taught her, holding him close as the melody wove through the bamboo shafts. The soldiers' torches flickered against the walls of green, casting long, distorted shadows. Hattori stepped forward, his helmet glinting dully. "Lady Emiko," he intoned, voice low and cold, "by order of Regent Takahiro, you and your child are under arrest for sedition and sorcery." Emiko's breath caught. She placed herself between Haruto and the intruders, her voice steady despite the thunder of her heart. "This child is no criminal. He was born of exile and nurtured by these mountains. You will take him only from my cold, unyielding hand." Captain Hattori smiled, a thin, cruel curve. "We have means to persuade you." At his signal, the soldiers advanced, swords drawn. But before steel could ring on bamboo, the forest spoke. A great stag emerged from the underbrush, antlers vast and regal, its eyes glowing like molten amber. At its side stood the scarred bear, its massive form looming like a living fortress. A chorus of birds rose into the sky, their wings beating against the growing tension. The soldiers froze, awe and terror mingling in their ranks. Emiko felt Haruto stir in her arms. The boy's gaze remained calm, his small hand resting lightly against the bear's flank. In that moment, a surge of warmth pulsed through the grove as the bamboo stalks bent inward, forming a protective arch. Light filtered through the leaves in swirling patterns, and an unseen hum thrummed beneath the earth. Captain Hattori's sword hand trembled, and he lowered his blade. He began, but could not finish. The forests will held him in a silent grip, revealing what Emiko already knew: no mortal order could conquer the ancient pact between mountain and child. Keeping her voice low, she addressed Hattori directly. Leave now, and return with honor. If you persist, you will test forces you cannot command. For a heartbeat, the enforcer stood motionless, his ambition warring against the raw power emanating from the grove. Then he signaled withdrawal, lips drawn tight. As the soldiers melted back into the shadows, Emiko exhaled a breath she had not realized she held. She cradled Haruto to her chest and whispered, "Thank you, my protectors," bowing her head to the stag and the bear, her allies in this hidden realm. When the last torches vanished, leaving only the moon's silver glow, Emiko rose and brushed bits of bamboo husk from her cloak. "My son," she said softly, "the world knows your name now. We must be ready for what comes next." Haruto looked up at her, his large eyes reflecting the lantern light. Emiko reached into her robe and retrieved the crimson-sealed parchment. She pressed it into Haruto's small palm, then kissed his forehead. "One day," she vowed, "you will face that world on your own terms. But tonight, you have faced it with the strength of the mountains behind you." High above, the bamboo grove stood sentinel, its leaves whispering in agreement. And somewhere beyond the distant peaks, the first threads of destiny began to weave themselves into a tapestry of trials, triumphs, and the unwavering bond between a mother, her son, and the ancient spirits of the wild. The dawn light filtered through the bamboo canopy like scattered gems, illuminating the soft mist that clung to the forest floor. Emiko stirred from her slumber with Haruto nestled against her side, his tiny chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Last night's confrontation with Captain Hattori and his retinue had left her both triumphant and unsettled. She knew that this mountain refuge could only shield them for so long. If Haruto was to survive the coming storms, he would need guidance not only from the spirits of the grove, but from those who understood the way of the blade and the art of inner strength. As the first rays of sun reached the grove's clearing, Emiko gathered her son into a woven sling and rose silently. She had long ago hidden a cache of supplies beneath a flat stone near the spring: dried fish, rice cakes, and bundles of medicinal herbs enough to sustain them for several days. She nursed Haruto at the spring's edge, letting the crisp water flow around her hands, filling her with the determination to prepare her son for the trials ahead. "Today," she whispered, pressing her forehead to Haruto's, "I will teach you the way of fire and stone. You have already shown that the mountains heed your call. Now you must learn to forge your own path." With Haruto clasped close, Emiko led him to a small clearing ringed by ancient pines and granite boulders. At its center lay a circle of stones smoothed by countless rains, the site where her own lessons had begun years before, under the tutelage of Master Kiyomizu, a Ronin who had deserted the capital when its politics grew too poisonous. Though Kiyomizu had passed on long ago, his teachings remained woven into the land. Emiko knelt before a flat stone and placed Haruto on its cool surface. The boy looked around with bright, unafraid eyes. "Come," Emiko said, pointing to a cluster of pine cones and birch bark. She struck two flints together with a practiced motion, sending sparks arcing into the dry tinder. A small flame flickered to life. Haruto reached out, mesmerized by the dancing light. Emiko held his hand steady, guiding him to feel the warmth without fear. Fire, she said softly, can destroy, but it can also sustain. You must learn respect before power. As the flame grew steadier, Emiko guided Haruto's hand to a flat piece of birch bark. She pressed it gently into the embers, letting the scent of smoke curl into the air. Then she spoke of the mountain's dual nature, how the same storm that could quench a fire might also nourish the earth, how a river that carved stone could also bring life to parched roots. Haruto's small brow furrowed in concentration as he absorbed her words, his dark eyes reflecting the orange glow. When the flame was secure, Emiko placed a few sticks on top, and the fire grew. She lifted a bundle of water from the spring, poured it into a small iron pot, and set it above the blaze. As the water bubbled, she recounted the story of Kazuki's first triumph on the battlefield, how he had used a controlled fire to flush out enemy archers hidden in bamboo groves, saving an entire regiment. Haruto listened, his lips parted in wonder, as the steam rose in gentle swirls. Once the simple meal of rice cakes warmed by the flame was ready, Emiko fed Haruto bite by bite, letting him taste the sweetness. Strength, she told him, is not measured by the force of your arm alone, but by the wisdom of your choices. A sword can cut a path through thorns, yet compassion can clear the way for others. After the meal, Emiko led Haruto to the circle's perimeter where 3 large stones stood like silent sentinels. She knelt beside the first and placed Haruto's small hand upon its rough surface. Feel the texture, she instructed. Let the stone teach you patience. It is as old as the mountain itself. Haruto pressed his palm flat, his fingers tracing the fissures. The stone seemed to hum beneath his touch. Emiko's heart swelled. She recognized in that hum the same resonance she had once felt under Master Kiyomizu's guidance, a reminder that the earth itself carries memory and strength. Next, she guided Haruto to the second stone, which bore a natural groove as if carved by flowing water. This stone knows the art of yielding, Emiko explained. It yielded to the river, yet over centuries it shaped the course of the stream. In life, knowing when to bend is as important as knowing when to stand firm. Haruto cupped his hand in the groove, imagining the river's whisper as droplets of spring water trickled through. Finally, Emiko brought Haruto to the third stone, which jutted sharply into the air like a spear. Its edges were jagged, almost menacing. Here lies the lesson of courage, she said. Your father faced blades sharper than this, fought battles darker than any knight in the grove. He died with honor because he refused to falter in the face of fear. Touch the stone, my son. Haruto reached out and brushed the tip of his finger against the cold, unyielding surface. A shiver passed through him, but he held fast. Emiko placed her hand over his, feeling him tremble, and offered a soft smile. Good. You are stronger than you know. A distant rumble rolled through the trees, drawing Emiko's gaze skyward. Dark clouds had gathered above the mountains, thunder echoing like drums. The first drops of rain fell scattered, then in a steady patter. Emiko scooped Haruto into her arms and retreated to a fallen log that served as a bench. The rain thickened, drumming on the stone circle and the pines. Haruto nestled against her warmth, his eyes heavy with sleep. As the storm raged, Emiko thought of the capital of Regent Takahiro's growing unease and the samurai who would surely return with greater numbers. She thought of Master Kiyomizu's final words, "The mountain can guide you, child, but to shape your destiny, you must carry the mountain's heart within you, wherever you go." She pressed Haruto to her chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart echo hers. One day, she vowed, you will carry this lesson into the world. When the rain began to taper, the grove shimmered under a veil of mist. Emiko wrapped Haruto in a soft blanket woven from cedar strips and placed him at the foot of the third stone. "Lie here," she murmured. "Rest, and let the earth heal you." Haruto did as she asked, drifting into sleep with the scent of rain-damp earth around him. Emiko sat beside him, watching as water droplets coalesced into rivulets, tracing the contours of the stones. She closed her eyes and allowed herself a moment of peace, for in this sacred circle of fire and stone, mother and son had taken their first steps on a path of unity with the mountain's spirit. Whatever storms lay ahead, she knew they would face them together, guided by lessons of balance, resilience, and honor. And as the clouds parted to reveal a pale sun, Emiko resolved to seek Master Kiyomizu's hidden refuge deeper within the mountains, a place where Haruto's training could continue under the watchful eyes of those who understood both sword and spirit. With a gentle sigh, she rose and gathered her son into her arms. The trial of fire and stone was complete, but it marked only the beginning of Haruto's journey, a journey that would test the strength of his heart, the clarity of his mind, and the bond he shared with the ancient world around him. And so, beneath the emerald bamboo and granite guardians, the next chapter of their legend awaited. The morning sun filtered through the mist like golden threads, illuminating the dew-laden needles of the towering pines that lined the narrow mountain trail. Emiko tightened the straps of her travel pack and lifted Haruto into the carrier woven from cedar bark straps. His dark eyes shone with curiosity as he peered through the lattice of the sling, watching dragonflies hover above the dew-wet ferns. Emiko offered him a small rice cake, and he accepted it with a delighted grin, crumbs dancing upon his lips. They moved with quiet purpose. Emiko knew their destination, the hidden refuge of Master Kiyomizu, whispered among exiled Ronin as the sanctuary of the Silver Spring. It lay beyond the craggy ridges, concealed by waterfalls and dense bamboo thickets. There, she believed, Haruto could continue his training under those who understood the ancient harmony between warrior's blade and forest song. Their departure from the bamboo grove was both sorrowful and hopeful. The great stag and the scarred bear had accompanied them to the forest's edge. Emiko knelt beside the stag's noble flank and pressed her palm to its coarse fur. "Thank you for your protection," she murmured, voice choked with gratitude. The stag lowered its antlered head, nuzzling her shoulder in farewell before melting back into the dappled shade. The bear rose on its hind legs and rumbled softly, then lumbered away, leaving behind an echoing promise of watchful guardianship. The path upward was steep and treacherous. Loose stones tumbled beneath their boots, and ancient roots twisted across the narrow way like sleeping serpents. Emiko navigated each step with care, her gaze flicking to Haruto every few heartbeats to ensure he was secure and comfortable. Though the boy was only 2 winters old, he displayed an uncanny sense of equilibrium, as though the mountain floor itself guided his posture. By midday, they reached a rocky ledge overlooking a valley blanketed in silver mist. Emiko paused to catch her breath and offered Haruto a sip from her leather water skin. He tasted the cool water and giggled, the sound drifting upward like a bird's song. Emiko smiled at him, her heart warmed by his innocence. In that moment, the world's dangers seemed distant, yet she could not forget the shadow of Regent Takahiro's ambition lurking beyond the mountain's rim. As they resumed their ascent, a whisper of movement drew Emiko's attention. A lone figure crouched behind a moss-covered boulder, observing them with keen interest. Emiko froze, instinctive tension coiling in her muscles. The stranger stepped forward, revealing a slender frame clad in gray robes, the hood drawn low over a weathered face. A glint of steel at his waist marked him as a swordsman, yet his posture spoke of disciplined restraint, not aggression. "My apologies, Lady Emiko," the man said, his voice calm as mountain air. "I did not wish to startle you or your son." He knelt, offering a small scroll tied with crimson silk. "I am Atsuhiro of the Wandering Wind. I served under Master Kiyomizu in seasons past. He instructed me to seek out any traveler who bore the mark of the Crimson Seal." Emiko's breath caught. The mark, the crimson-sealed parchment from Kazuki's blade, had been sewn into Haruto's sling, and its wax seal now bore an unmistakable emblem etched by Kazuki's own hand. She glanced at Haruto nestled against her chest, then accepted the scroll with trembling fingers. "Master Kiyomizu is alive, then?" She whispered, hope and relief warring in her chest. Atsuhiro bowed his head. "He shelters those deemed pariahs by the court, and he has awaited your arrival. The path to his refuge is perilous, but I swear upon my blade to guide you both safely." Emiko exhaled, a wave of gratitude washing over her. "Thank you, honorable samurai. We would be honored by your guidance." They pressed onward together, the four forming a quiet procession through stands of whispering pines. With every step, Atsuhiro shared fragments of Master Kiyomizu's teachings, the importance of stillness beneath turmoil, the unity of breath and blade, and the ancient vow to protect life even in times of war. Haruto listened intently, his dark eyes reflecting the dappled sunlight that danced across the forest floor. As the trail wound deeper into the heart of the mountains, they encountered the first trial, a sheer cliff face veined with glittering quartz, its surface slick from recent rains. Above them, the sound of rushing water grew louder, the silver spring lay beyond. Emiko studied the rock, gauging hidden handholds. Atsuhiro moved first, nimbly ascending, his robe sleeves tied back to allow agile movement. Emiko followed, guiding Haruto's hands to secure holds, her own arms trembling as each shift tested her strength. Haruto, cradled against her back, reached out and tapped a small outcropping of quartz. The stone shimmered in response, a faint hum beneath his touch. "Mother," he whispered, voice soft as the wind. Stone speaks. Emiko's heart swelled. Yes, my son. It teaches us that even the hardest surfaces hold secrets. When they reached the crest, the sight before them stole their breaths away, a crystalline pool fed by a slender waterfall cascading from unseen heights. Moonlight pooled within its depths, reflecting in a dance of silver and sapphire. A circular pavilion of bamboo and stone hovered above the water, bridged by a narrow promenade. Etsuhiro guided Emiko and Haruto across the bridge. At the pavilion's center stood a robed figure whose back was turned, a silhouette slender and frail against the luminous pool. Master Kiyomizu. Emiko's eyes filled with tears as she knelt before him, Haruto twisting in her arms to peer at the elder's lined profile. Kiyomizu turned slowly, his pale eyes soft beneath heavy brows. He extended a trembling hand to Haruto, inviting the boy forward. Haruto stepped into the pavilion, guided by gentle wind that caused the bamboo walls to sway like living vines. The wind carried with it whispers of gratitude and ancient blessing. "Welcome, child of exile," Master Kiyomizu intoned, voice weary but resolute. "I have seen your path written upon the currents of air and felt your strength in the tremor of stones. You are ready to learn the deeper ways, the union of blade and breath, the harmony of action and stillness." Haruto's small hand slipped into the master's, and for a moment, time held its breath. Emiko bowed her head, overwhelmed with emotion. Master Kiyomizu laid a gentle palm on her shoulder. "Lady Emiko, your sacrifice has saved him from death's shadow. Now, I will teach him the ancient art so that he may choose his destiny with honor." Night fell, blanketing them in a cloak of starlight. The waters of the silver spring glimmered like scattered jewels as Master Kiyomizu spoke of the coming trials, lessons of endurance beneath the watchful eye of the mountains, tests of compassion. Amidst battlefield echoes, and the ultimate choice between vengeance and forgiveness. Emiko listened, cradling Haruto who peered wide-eyed at the flickering lanterns. When the lesson ended, Kiyomizu presented Haruto with a small wooden practice sword, its hilt wrapped in crimson cord, the color of his father's legacy and the path of fire and blood that lay before him. Haruto's eyes shone as he grasped the weapon, its weight both foreign and familiar in his small hands. "Rest now," Kiyomizu whispered, "for tomorrow the true journey begins." Emiko laid Haruto upon a bed of soft bamboo mats, wrapping him in a blanket scented with pine resin and mugwort. She bowed again to the master. "Thank you for this gift." Kiyomizu nodded, and his gaze drifted to the starlit sky. "The world stirs, Lady Emiko. Soon, the drums of war will echo through these mountains once more. But here, under the watch of whispering pines and silver springs, hope endures." As Emiko watched Haruto drift into sleep, she felt the weight of her vow settle upon her soul. Their journey had brought them to a new beginning, one forged in exile, tempered by trials of stone, fire, and compassion, and guided by the wisdom of a Ronin who had chosen to save life rather than take it. Tomorrow, Haruto would awaken to lessons that would shape him into something more than a child of legend. He would become a beacon of balance between the world of steel and the realm of nature. And Emiko, his mother and guardian, would stand ever at his side, a living testament to sacrifice, love, and the unbreakable bond between blood and spirit. Under the moon's gentle glow, the sanctuary of the Silver Spring breathed with ancient life, awaiting the trials to come and the destiny of the child named Haruto. Before dawn's hush had lifted, Emiko woke to the soft whistle of wind threading through the bamboo screens of the pavilion. She found Haruto already sitting upright on his roll of woven mats, clutching the crimson-cord practice sword with both small hands, his dark eyes bright with anticipation. Across from him, Master Kiyomizu stirred in the lantern's glow, unrolling a scroll embroidered with ancient calligraphy. Today, Kiyomizu said in a voice as low as the mountain breeze, "You will learn to listen, not only with ears, but with the heart. For a sword unsheathed without understanding is merely a tool of destruction. But a blade guided by compassion can protect life even in the face of violence." Haruto's gaze shifted from the scroll to his mother, whose reassuring smile dissolved any morning chill. Emiko knelt beside him, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead. "Remember the flame and the stones," she whispered. "Balance in all things." Haruto nodded solemnly, eyes never leaving the master's aged form. Kiyomizu rose, his back a silhouette of ancient resilience. He stretched both arms wide, then cupped his hands to his mouth and drew in a breath so quiet it barely stirred the lantern's flame. "Follow me," he instructed, gesturing toward the narrow path that led deeper into the sanctuary grounds. Emiko rose and settled Haruto into the cedar bark carrier upon her back. The boy pressed his cheek to her shoulder, eager for what lay beyond. They emerged into a grove of towering pines whose needles formed a thick carpet beneath their feet. The air was cool, the earth damp as if still holding last night's rain. At the grove's center lay a stone dais, a shallow depression ringed by weathered statues of past students, each carved with meditative poise. Kiyomizu motioned them onto the dais. "Stand here," he said, his gaze drifting upward to the swaying branches. "Close your eyes. Feel the wind as it slips between the needles. Let it carry your thoughts away, until only the moment remains." Emiko and Haruto obeyed. The wind fell away, replaced by the distant murmur of water and the soft rhythm of Haruto's breathing. Emiko steadied herself, recalling the countless nights she had sought solace beneath these pines. After a minute that stretched like liquid time, Kiyomizu spoke, "Open your eyes." Haruto blinked first, taking in the statues and the pale light. Emiko looked to Kiyomizu, who studied them both with a critical calm. "Now," he said, "I will call your name, Haruto. When you hear it, raise your sword in salute, but only if you believe the action honors both blade and spirit." Haruto's grip tightened around the practice sword's hilt. Kiyomizu closed his eyes again, then opened them to regard the forest around him. With a swift motion, he brought his hands together, sending a sudden gust through the pine needles. The wind coalesced into a distinct voice that carried across the grove, "Haruto." The boy's hand rose almost unconsciously, blade pointing skyward. The wind stilled. Kiyomizu nodded. Good. You felt the call. He turned slowly, as though surveying an unseen battlefield. Now listen again. He cupped his hands to whisper a single word, Haruto. This time, the wind carried a harsher note, a cracking of twigs to their left. Haruto's hand remained at his side. He frowned, eyes narrowing toward the sound. Kiyomizu inclined his head once more. You discerned danger, true. A blade raised in ignorance might harm what you seek to protect. Emiko felt pride swell inside her. Kiyomizu, sensing her thoughts, let a faint smile touch his lips. He extended his arm toward a cluster of maple trees, where two pupils' teenage siblings named Rin and Sara stepped into view, bodies tense and poised with wooden training swords. Their eyes burned with rivalry. Rin, Sara, Kiyomizu called, voice firm yet gentle. Demonstrate to Haruto the lesson of echoes, our actions reverberate in every heart they touch. The siblings bowed to Haruto and Emiko, then faced each other in combat stance. Rin advanced swiftly, sword aimed low, Sara ducked and countered high. The clash of wood rang out, echoing through the grove. Haruto watched, fascination shining in his gaze. Emiko placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. From the pavilion behind them, a second wind whispered, Haruto. The boy let his practice sword rest at his hip. Kiyomizu's voice followed, why do you not salute? Haruto twisted sideways to look at the duelists. They fight each other, he answered simply. To sharpen their skills, yes, but they do not hear me call them. Kiyomizu nodded, pride warming his expression. Exactly. A blade drawn must know its target, and a heart silent to its own voice cannot guide it. He turned to Rin and Sara. You two, show mercy. Let each strike test resolve, not destroy spirit. Rin lunged again, more carefully, aiming for Sara's shoulder. Sara countered with a feint, then flowed behind Rin's guard. At the final clash, they paused inches apart, eyes meeting, and Rin lowered her sword first. Sara returned the gesture. Neither had drawn blood, instead, they bowed together in mutual respect. The grove's air seemed to thrum with harmony. Kiyomizu addressed Haruto, remember this moment. Strength without compassion leaves scars that never heal. Haruto's small hand clenched the hilt as he absorbed the lesson. Suddenly, a distant horn echoed through the pines, an ominous note, ragged and far off. Kiyomizu's expression darkened. Trouble approaches, he murmured. Emiko's heart clenched. They had only begun Haruto's training, yet already the world outside encroached. Kiyomizu strode to the grove's edge and called softly. From the underbrush emerged Etsuhiro, breath heavy, followed by a pair of scouts bearing live blades. Their eyes reflected concern. Master, Etsuhiro said, bowing deeply. Bandits roam the lower passes. They are allied to Regent Takahiro's enforcers, hunting all whom they deem threats. They close by nightfall. Kiyomizu nodded gravely and returned to the dais. He faced Emiko and Haruto. Our lesson cannot end here. You must learn to stand guard not with blade alone, but with unity of heart and steel. He beckoned Haruto forward and knelt so that his weathered eyes met the boy's. We will train at twilight. Tonight, you will stand watch at the grove's entrance. Use your senses, wind, echoes, hearts to warn of danger, then stand firm. This will be your first trial beyond learning. Protect those who shelter within. Haruto inhaled deeply and nodded, steeling himself. Emiko knelt to kiss his forehead. I am proud of you, Haruto, she whispered. We face the storm as one. All through the day, as sunlight slanted through the pines, Emiko and Haruto practiced movement footwork silent as falling leaves, glances attuned to shifting shadows, and whispered signals that passed between them without words. Rin and Sara joined them, passing bowls of rice porridge and teaching simple meditation, clearing the mind until only purpose remained. As dusk bled into night, lanterns were lit within the pavilion. The master surveyed them with measured pride. Now begins your true watch. Emiko, you will rest within. Haruto, stand here. He pointed to a low stone at the grove's threshold. Haruto settled upon it, practice sword laid across his lap, eyes alert. Emiko curled beside him, offering warmth and silent support. The wind drifted through the pines like a lullaby, yet beneath its murmur lay tension as though the forest itself held its breath for what might come. In the growing darkness, the first whispers of movement approached, a rustle of underbrush, the faint creak of boots on root and stone. Haruto lifted his gaze to the edge of the grove, gripping his sword until knuckles whitened. Kiyomizu's voice echoed in Haruto's mind from their morning lesson, listen with heart. The boy inhaled slowly, exhaling doubt. He felt the wind's subtle shift, heard not only the crack of a twig but the trembling heartbeat of the ones who would invade. When the shapes emerged, hooded figures moving in stealth, Haruto stood, raised his sword, and called out in a clear voice, halt. You step upon sacred ground. The intruders froze. For a moment, silence reigned, broken only by Haruto's calm challenge and the wind's whispering applause through the pines. Emiko rose beside him, placing a protective hand on his shoulder. The two scouts who followed Etsuhiro stepped into the lantern light, blades at the ready but lowered, recognizing the discipline in the boy's stance and the master's hidden presence. Haruto's heart pounded, but he held his ground. In that decisive instant, he understood, a true warrior stands not to conquer, but to safeguard life and honor. Under the watchful gaze of whispering pines and beneath the stars' silent witness, Haruto's first true trial had begun, and with it, the echoes of his resolve would carry far beyond these mountains. The moon rode high above the Ashiguro Mountains, its silver light spilling across the mist-shrouded grove like a blessing. Beneath the whispering pines, lanterns glowed softly in the pavilion and along the stone path leading to the silver spring. The air was thick with anticipation, the distant howls of bandits drifting through the trees, mingled with the low murmur of Master Kiyomizu's voice as he conferred with Itsuhiro and the young siblings. Rin and Sara. Emiko knelt at the pavilion's entrance, Haruto pressed against her side. His practice sword lay across his lap, its crimson cord gleaming in the lantern light. The boy's dark eyes shone with resolve. He had passed his first watch, but the trials were only just beginning. "Mother," he whispered, voice barely above the rustle of bamboo leaves, "they come in greater numbers now." Emiko placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. "You have your training, Haruto. Trust in your senses, and trust in those who stand behind you." She looked to Master Kiyomizu, who met her gaze with calm certainty. "Prepare yourselves," Kiyomizu intoned. He raised both arms in a slow, sweeping arc, summoning the energy of the grove. The lantern flames flickered, and a hush fell over their defenders. Even Rin and Sara fell silent, drawing their wooden swords and forming a loose semicircle between the pavilion and the grove's threshold. Moments later, a ragged trumpet call echoed from the forest's edge, a challenge issued by the bandits allied with Regent Takahiro. Their number was far greater now, at least 20 shadowy figures moving just beyond torchlight, weapons drawn. Itsuhiro stepped forward, unsheathing his blade with a single, fluid motion. "They come to seize the child of exile," he said grimly. "We cannot allow that." Master Kiyomizu nodded, then addressed Haruto directly. "Step forward, young ward. Show them that mercy is not weakness, but conviction." Haruto drew breath, planting bare feet on the mossy stone. He rose, lifting his practice sword in salute. The lanterns cast his shadow across the ground, stretching tall and unwavering. Rin and Sara sharpened their stances at his flanks. Emiko slipped behind them, ready to aid where needed. A final breeze stirred the pines, carrying Kiyomizu's voice one last time, "Remember balanced strength tempered by compassion. Let the wind guide your blade." At that signal, a dozen bandits charged into the clearing, torches held aloft. Their leader, a hulking man with scars crisscrossing his face, bellowed, "Surrender the boy, or we burn this grove to ashes." Haruto planted his feet, chin lifted. "Leave now," he called, voice clear and unwavering. "You stand upon counted breaths of wind and stones older than your fear. Turn back, or face the judgment of these sacred woods." The bandit leader sneered. He raised his arm, signaling an assault, but before his cohorts could advance, a ripple of motion rippled through the forest's edge. From behind the trees, the great stag emerged once more, its antlers silhouetted against moonlight. At its side, the scarred bear lumbered forward. Then, from further back, deer and foxes and a flock of flight birds filled the clearing's periphery, forming a living bulwark around the defenders. A gasp rippled through the bandits, hesitation seizing their ranks. Their leader snarled, but his blade wavered in mid-air, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. Seizing the moment, Itsuhiro and Kiyomizu moved together, Itsuhiro's sword flashing like quicksilver, Kiyomizu's staff sweeping arcs of disciplined force. Rin and Sara advanced in tandem, wooden blades tapping the ground in measured rhythm. Emiko, sword in hand for the first time since ascending the mountain, took position beside Haruto, her eyes never leaving the boy's steady figure. The bandits lunged, but each step stirred whispers through the forest, the wind warning them, the earth trembling beneath their feet, the creatures that had come to Haruto's aid shifting in unison. Every strike they attempted met a barrier, a stag's rushing flank, a bear's uprooted stump, a fox darting underfoot to snatch a torch aloft and extinguish it. Amid the chaos, Haruto moved with grace that belied his youth. He sidestepped a swinging club, gently knocking it aside with the flat of his practiced sword. He did not push the attacker to the ground, rather, he guided the man's momentum past him, sending him stumbling toward the forest's edge, where a fox blocked his retreat until he turned back in shame. Time seemed to dilate as each defender wove together offense and counsel. Rin disarmed one bandit, then pressed the point of her sword against his chest, whispering that mercy would be granted if he renounced violence. Sara disarmed another, offering water and calm words instead of blood. Kiyomizu dispatched a trio with swift, non-lethal strikes, then knelt beside them to bind their wounds. Etsuiro's blade danced, deflecting blades with minimal force, then sliding free to gently disarm another handful of attackers. Emiko faced the hulking leader at last. His scarred fist swung with brutal intent, but she met it with a calm parry, her blade flashing once. She did not press the attack, instead, she whispered, "Let this end, for there is nothing here for you but regret." The leader's raised arm trembled as he studied her face, fierce yet compassionate. Slowly, he lowered his fist, then his torch. The forest exhaled behind them. With a final, unified breath, the defenders stood firm, forming a circle around Haruto and Emiko. The bandits, disarmed and subdued, knelt in the lantern's glow. One by one, they lowered their heads, silence draping the clearing like a soft cloak. Master Kiyomizu sheathed his staff and approached the bandit leader. "You came to take a child," he said quietly. "But you have learned there are greater bonds than fear or gold. Leave this place, carry this lesson with you, and let the grove's mercy guide your path." The leader bowed deeply, eyes wet. "I will not forget," he rasped. "My hands have found peace in battle, but in this silence, I find something stronger." As the bandits turned to depart, the creatures of the grove melted back into their hiding places, stag, bear, deer, and the rest leaving the clearing empty but for the defenders and the softly glowing lanterns. Emiko exhaled, her knees weakening. Haruto stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her waist. "You were magnificent," he whispered, voice brimming with pride. She stroked his hair. "You led them, Haruto," she said. "I followed you." Rin and Sara came to stand beside them, offering bowls of rice cakes and warm tea. Etsuiro nodded respectfully at Haruto. "You have proven your heart tonight, child. The world will test you again, but you have shown the first mark of a true guardian." Master Kiyomizu surveyed the clearing in quiet triumph. "Tonight, the stand of the Silver Spring has held. May this grove remain a sanctuary for all who seek its protection." Under the pale moonlight, mother and son, teacher and student, stood together in the aftermath of battle, bound by a common code, strength tempered by mercy, courage guided by compassion, and a harmony between heart and blade that no darkness could ever extinguish. Before the first light of dawn had pierced the fog that clung to the sanctuary's bamboo walls, Haruto was awake, practicing the silent footwork Master Kiyomizu had taught him. Each step was precise and balanced, his bare feet memorizing the curve of the wooden floor as though it were his own pulse. Emiko watched from the doorway of their pavilion, cradling a steaming bowl of rice porridge, grateful that her son's restless spirit had found purpose in discipline rather than fear. Master Kiyomizu emerged as the sky blushed with pink. His robes were simple but immaculate, and his eyes held a gentle gravity. He nodded to Emiko, who bowed in reply, then beckoned Haruto forward. "Today," Kiyomizu said, voice soft as the whispering pines, "you will leave this grove and journey to Sunbloom Village. There, the people suffer under a failing harvest and the threat of returning bandits. You will walk among them, learn their needs, and if your spirit remains true, offer them protection." Haruto's heart surged. The opportunity to serve beyond the sanctuary felt like the next step on his destiny's path. Emiko stepped forward, concern etched on her face. "Master, the villagers, will they accept a child as their guardian?" Kiyomizu's lips curved in a gentle smile. "They will see in you what you carry within your heart. Fearless devotion can inspire hope in even the darkest places." He turned to Haruto. "Gather your sword, your courage, and go with it Tsuiro and Rin and Sara. Emiko will lead you to the path's fork. I will remain to ensure the sanctuary endures in your absence." Haruto nodded, securing the crimson cord practice sword at his side. The young siblings strapped on light packs and Tsuiro donned his worn but well-oiled armor. Emiko adjusted Haruto's sling, pressing a kiss to his temple. "Be cautious," she whispered. "And remember every lesson: fire and stone, wind and echoes, mercy and resolve." They set out along the mossy trail, the air sharp with morning frost. For the first time, Haruto felt the full weight of responsibility beyond the grove's protective circle. Each breath seemed to draw in both anticipation and humility. The path wound downward, past cascading waterfalls and through stands of towering cedar that filtered the sunlight into emerald shafts. At a bifurcation marked by an ancient stone lantern, Emiko paused. "This way leads to the valley," she told Haruto, pointing to the left fork. "Sunbloom Village lies across the river. Keep your wits and your heart open." Haruto took her hand. "I will make you and the master proud." Emiko squeezed his fingers and turned back toward the sanctuary, her eyes shining with both pride and longing. He watched her vanish into the mist before stepping forward with Tsuiro, Rin, and Sara. The descent quickened as they approached a rickety wooden bridge spanning a roaring river swollen by spring rains. Haruto felt the timbre of the water in his bones, a rushing song that warned of hidden currents and jagged stones below. He led the way, tapping each plank with his foot before stepping, listening for the echo of hollow wood that might give way. One board groaned and cracked. Haruto hesitated, then chose a sturdier line to cross. Behind him, Rin and Sara followed his lead, Etsuhiro bringing up the rear. On the far bank, Sunbloom village clustered against the foothills like a scattering of carved lanterns. Thatched roofs leaned toward one another for support, and the fields beyond lay parched and cracked, the bright stalks of rice faded to brittle pale. Villagers moved with measured desperation, hauling water in buckets, coaxing the last of the crop from the soil, or nervously glancing toward the timberline, where the banner of Regent Takahiro's enforcers still flickered among the pines. At the village entrance, a group of farmers barred their way. A burly man with sun-cracked skin and a tangle of graying hair stepped forward. His eyes were wary but weary. "Who comes here?" he demanded. "A child and strangers. What aid can you offer us?" Haruto drew a steady breath and grasped the hilt of his practiced sword. He looked beyond the villagers' fear to their hearts. "I am Haruto, son of exile. I come by the blessing of Master Kiyomizu and Lady Emiko to help you protect your homes and your harvest." His voice carried across the dusty air, both calm and unwavering. The villagers exchanged glances. The burly man's gaze softened as he studied Haruto's earnest expression. "If you truly mean to help, there is a well digger stuck beyond the eastern rice paddies. He's wounded after a cave-in. The river's guard den refuses to send aid." A tremor of anger touched his voice. "They say only soldiers of the regent may pass freely." Etsuhiro stepped forward, sheathing his sword but keeping his hand close to the hilt. "Lead the way, farmer. We will aid your digger." The villagers parted, allowing the small party to proceed. As they passed through the narrow mud lanes, Haruto observed every face turned toward him: children clutching tobacco pipe dolls, elders leaning on staves, mothers holding frightened infants. In their eyes, he saw pain and hope mingled like rain and sun. He pressed his lips together, determined to live up to their unspoken trust. Beyond the eastern fields, they found the well-digger, an elderly man trapped beneath a fallen boulder in a half-excavated shaft. Blood trickled from a gash on his forehead, and he struggled to haul the stone's weight. Haruto knelt beside him, placing a hand flat on the earth. He closed his eyes and felt the rock's stubborn resistance. Remembering the lesson of the second trial, stone yields when met with stillness, Haruto exhaled calm into his palm. The boulder trembled, then shifted just enough for the digger to pull free. Etsuhiro and Rin heaved together to roll it aside fully. The man sat gasping, eyes wide with awe. I thought only soldiers could save me," he stammered. "How did you?" Haruto offered a hand to help him up. "Compassion guides strength," he replied simply. "Now, let us patch your wound." Sara applied clean cloth and whispered words of comfort. As they worked, the man pressed Haruto's hand. "You are a blessing," he said, voice thick with emotion. "May the mountain spirits forever watch over you." They returned to the village square, where villagers waited anxiously. When they saw the rescued digger emerge, a cheer rose through the dusty lanes. Haruto felt a warmth bloom in his chest. His first act of service beyond the sanctuary had united a broken community, even if for a moment. But the day's reprieve was short-lived. A distant war horn sounded a summons from the guard of Regent Takahiro. The farmers stiffened, glancing toward the timberline where dark shapes gathered. The burly farmer cursed under his breath. They have sent soldiers to demand tribute. They will seize what little grain we have left. Etsuhiro drew his sword. We cannot allow that. He looked to Haruto. This is your chance, child of the mountain. Show them the strength tempered by mercy we have taught you. Haruto gripped his practice sword, recalling the trial of fire and stone, the watch at the Whispering Pines, and the stand of the Silver Spring. Each memory imbued him with resolve. He stepped into the road, standing between the villagers and the forest's trembling edge. Behind him, Rin, Sara, and Etsuhiro formed a protective line, wooden swords laid across their chests in salute. When the regiment emerged, a dozen armored soldiers under the banner of Regent Takahiro, their captain, sneered at the small group. Step aside, child, or we will teach you the cost of defiance. His troops advanced, metal boots jarring the earth. Haruto raised his sword. Turn back, he called, voice strong and unflinching. This village has no true riches for you, only hope and harvest. Take them, and you steal the people's dreams. The captain laughed, raising his spear. Then we shall take both. He lunged forward, but the earth itself seemed to respond. Haruto echoed the motion of the boulders released days before, grounding himself firmly. As the soldier's spearhead drew near, Haruto swept his practice sword in a gentle arc, guiding the man's strike harmlessly past, then tapping the spear shaft to disarm him. The soldier stumbled, dropping his weapon, breathless and bewildered. Rin and Sara moved in unison to disarm two more soldiers, while Etsuhiro parried with the crisp efficiency of a seasoned samurai. The villagers watched in awe as the small party defended them without bloodshed, turning the soldiers' aggression back upon itself. The captain, red-faced with fury, gestured for a retreat. Fall back, he barked. His men complied, stepping away as if repelled by an invisible force. The banners of Takahiro's guard snapped in the wind as they withdrew. When the last soldier vanished into the forest, a hush fell upon Sunbloom village. Then the farmer who had first met them stepped forward, bowing deeply to Haruto. Child of the mountain, he intoned, voice trembling, you have saved us not only from bandits, but from despair. Your mercy has taught us to stand beside hope once more. Haruto bowed in return, feeling the weight of gratitude that flowed from every villager. Etsuhiro laid a hand on his shoulder. You have done well, young guardian. Your path grows clearer with each trial. As dusk settled, lanterns were lit throughout Sunbloom village in Haruto's honor. Children danced clumsy celebrations, elders offered bowls of sweet rice wine, and women wove garlands of wildflowers to drape around the sanctuary gate they had built in gratitude. Haruto accepted their gifts with humility, offering smiles that shone brighter than any torchlight. That night, beneath a sky strewn with stars and watched over by the moon's silver eye, Haruto sat at the threshold of Sunbloom's largest hall. Villagers gathered around him as Itsuhiro and the siblings shared tales of the sanctuary's hidden glades and the lessons they had learned. Emiko's voice rang clear in his memory: "Trust in your heart, and carry the mountain spirit with you." Haruto closed his eyes and inhaled the mingled scents of rice and dew, of wood smoke, and fresh foliage. He felt not the weight of his young years, but the strength of every lesson he had earned. He was a child born of exile, trained by a master's wisdom, guided by the spirits of the grove, and now, he was the guardian of hope for an entire village. As the villagers sang low hymns of gratitude, Haruto lifted his practice sword in salute, its crimson cord fluttering like a banner in the night breeze. Under the vast canopy of heaven, he vowed anew, to protect life with both steel and compassion, to honor the legacy of his parents and his master, and to carry the mountain's heart